Warning, this podcast is not for the faint-hearted. So what, we like to blast our music a little bit louder, play it a little bit angrier, and chuck in a scream every now and again. Grab your eyeliner, favourite band t-shirt, and most ripped pair of skinny jeans, because things are about to kick off. If you're a mosh pitter, crowd surfer, rowboater, headbanger, or wall of deather, you have just found heaven for the next 15 minutes. My name is Jessica Johnson, and joining me on this crazy ride around Melbourne in today's episode is Paula Medina chatting about our local scene. Clare Lynch will be sharing her insights into the world of classical and metal music, and Tekin from Melbourne's very own up-and-coming band A New Way Home will be taking us on a behind-the-scenes look into the band's writing and recording process. Oh, and did I forget to mention, we'll be covering the latest Australian heavy music news from the past month, and also reviewing Terra's newest EP, dropped just last week. Get comfortable, grab a drink, and get ready to kick off the weekend the right way. You are listening to the Moody Music Podcast. My first guest is Paula Medina, the bassist and vocalist of Chilean pop-punk band Omura. Paula has been living, studying and working in Australia for the past 7 months. I caught up with her via Zoom to talk about her first impressions of the Melbourne music scene.
I've been very amazed actually. I knew some bands before coming here, but I've got to see like lots of local bands in different venues and I've been very surprised, very amazed by the quality of them. I've been listening to a lot of new bands actually that I didn't know before. For example, the beautiful Monument. They're amazing. Like those girls have a huge power, like huge stage presence.
They're really cool because they actually played a Unify gathering earlier this year and they were just quite awesome. It's the 5 of them, isn't it?
It's 5 of them. Well, they're 4 girls and their drummer is a guy, but they're all amazing. I didn't get to see them at Unify, but I did get to see them at the emo boat party. So that was another thing that amazed me about these kind of parties that you have basically every weekend. It's like I never expected that I would go to an emo party on a boat. Yeah, that was amazing.
What's the music scene in Melbourne compared to Chile back home?
There are a lot of local bands, but we don't have the same support that you guys have here. I mean that the local scene has here. When I played there, we used to play in small venues and not many people would show up. What I can tell here is that people support the scene, the local scene very much. For example, I remember a few months ago when Slowly announced their show for their release record, the tickets sold out in like 2 or 3 days. That was like, wow, that was huge for me. Every time a band plays in my hometown, it's very hard to get people to go to the shows.
Yeah, a lot of our shows sell out so fast, and just as you said, Slowly's Race Car Blues tour in Melbourne sold out in just 2 days, which is absolutely crazy.
I can tell that here is like very active. We used to, of course, had a lot of gigs mostly every weekend, these emo parties I told you about.
It's very strange not having gigs on every weekend or something to do.
Yeah, it is. Like I miss it very much because I was going to as much as I could.
On a good weekend, how many gigs would you say that you would attend while in Melbourne?
Oh, good weekend. Well, the weekend I went to more gigs. I think I went to like 3 on the same weekend. One on Friday, then on Saturday, and then another one on Sunday.
Yeah, see, that's a good effort. That's like really nicely planned out.
Yeah, I know.
And the thing with the Melbourne music scene is that even just in one night, there's so many things on. Like you could have 2 or 3 things on that same night, and it's like, which one do I go to? Do I try to go to all of them, or do I have to choose one? Very hard decisions.
Yeah, that happened to me actually once. I wanted to go to a few gigs and I was like, no, what do I do? So I ended up going to 2 actually of like 4 I wanted to go, but it was definitely worth it. Like I enjoyed them both. So yeah, it's good to have a lot of things to do. Well, it was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, we really do love our local music. Even with Oz T-Shirt Music Day that Triple J, they really promote it. They really emphasise Oz T-Shirt Music Day, which is really great to see supporting our music industry here in Australia.
Yeah, I remember about that. I had no idea. And I was here when that happened. So I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is very nice.
You are listening to the Moody Music Podcast. That was Paula Medina and I chatting about the Melbourne music scene. Stick around as later on guitarist Tekin will be taking us behind the scenes of A New Way Home's writing and recording process. But first, all your music news from right around Australia from the month of May in the next 60 seconds. In early May, Enemy of the Night, Shiraz and Pinot Griot was announced as a collaboration between the heavy metal band Northlane and Sydney Crowbar. A few days after the new merch was launched, lead singer Marcus Bridge celebrated by posting an Instagram picture of both wines with his Samoyed dog posing. The Instagram livestream music festival Isolade continues to support Aussie artists, giving musicians a chance to perform on their Instagram channels during specific set times. Melbourne's very own Slowly and Alex Moses, lead singer of the Brisbane trio Columbus, are just some of the names that took part out during the May Isolate festivals. Polaris has also been a hot topic in music news this month. Their Live at the Wireless hometown set recorded at Enmore Theatre in Sydney was played not once but twice on Triple J during May. Last week, Jamie Howells featured in Hellbringer, their new single by In Heart's Wake. The video clip featured the Polaris singer with a werewolf makeover. And last Friday, Melbournians Terra released their latest EP titled Into Deep Blue, which we will dive deep into very shortly in the Moody Music podcast. That was news in 60 seconds. Stay tuned for a review of Terra's newest EP, and later we chat to classical violinist Clare Lynch about the world of classical and metal music, all coming up in the next few minutes. Moody Music. Terra are a 5-piece pop-punk alternative rock band from Melbourne formed in 2014. One drummer, 3 guitars, and vocals led by frontwoman Cassie Sutton, who nails the punk chick aesthetic on stage and on Terra's debut EP, Wasted Days. In 2017, it shows a softer side on their newest EP, Into Deep Blue, which was released last week. Terra is no stranger to the Melbourne music scene, as they supported Ocean Grove in December on a Misery Emo Boat Party event, and the band also played at Heavy Metal Music Festival Unify Gathering 2020 in January, and recently supported UK rock band As It Is on their Australian tour Down Under in Feb. Into Deep Blue features 3 songs, 1 brand new one and 2 acoustic songs, including Confidence featuring David Delahoz, originally released in 2019, and Breaking, which was off the Wasted Days EP. I did find it slightly disappointing having an EP with just 3 songs on it when most EPs generally have 4 or 5. The actual tone of the EP is quite different from what we have already heard from Terra. Wasted Days and the single Confidence are clearly in the pop-punk alternative rock genres with a very Avril Lavigne 2002 Let Go vibes, with the extra emphasis of Terra's loud guitars in the mix. Into Deep Blue is dramatically different to Terra's previous music. This EP is very singer-songwriter acoustic and much more softer and minimalistic. The single song for Maddie off the EP is very deeply emotionally loaded and extremely personal. The vocals are gentle and the lyrics are just poetic. It's a very peaceful song and feels like a weight has just been lifted off your shoulders. The EP in full starts very soft and quiet with Song for Maddie, then builds up faster and louder with an acoustic version of Confidence. It's a very risky EP, as most bands define their sound in the first few releases, and going from heavy pop-punk alternative rock to acoustic singer-songwriter, it will be very interesting to see whether Terra will soften up their music style, or if they were just testing out the waters with a different sound before releasing heavier music in the future. You are listening to the Moody Music Podcast. My next guest is classical trained violinist and metalhead Clare Lynch. Clare currently teaches violin and also has toured with the Southern Gothic blues band Dead Preachers. Despite growing up in a classical music household, over the years Clare has turned to heavier styles of music, listening to bands such as Architects, Polaris, Northlane and Neo Obliviscaris. Earlier this week I had a chat with Clare over Zoom, where she shared her insights into the classical and metal music scene.
So I am into pretty much most kinds of metal. At the moment, obviously it's got a lot of genres within metal itself, but as a classical musician, I started listening to the band you mentioned, Neo Obliviscaris, because they had a classical violin and slightly more similarity to classical music, or what I was used to, and then from there I really got into most genres of metal.
Yeah, especially Neo Obliviscaris, with them being a Melbourne band and also a progressive metal band. As you said, they do use elements of classical violin, which is your expertise because you teach it. What are some of the similarities across both metal and classical genres?
I think on the surface they look completely different, but I think that's probably all maybe more superficial things. Also, from a musical point of view, there's a lot of different elements going into the pieces, and there's a lot of contrast between, chill and anger and energy, between light and dark, and the songs really lead you on a bit of a journey through that story. And I think that's something that I see that's very similar in metal and in classical as well.
Do you think that classical music and metal music will continue to work together? As an example, off Thornhill's album, The Dark Pool, there's this instrumental song called Nether Place, and it features just like very soft, calming piano.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because they do completely contrast. As I say, I think the metal community is probably quite appreciative of classical. I don't think it's the other way around. So in some regards, they don't really work so well together. But in terms of actual music, yes, I definitely think that they really kind of do work in a kind of surprising way quite well together. And yes, that Thornhill piece you mentioned, also sort of a theme throughout a lot of songs, really. Cradle of Filth, they've got, their very pretty sections contrasted with the heavy sections, and obviously the classical instruments really fit into those quieter sections. Although in symphonies there are those quieter sections, and then there's a really crazy energetic bit as well. Metal kind of mirrors that with obviously different instruments and different sounds.
That was Clare Lynch sharing her personal views on how the classical and metal scene balance each other. You are listening to the Moody Music Podcast. My lucky last guest is Tekin, who is one of A New Way Home's guitarists. In 2018, Jesse and bassist Gavin started the pop-punk band and is now a solid group of 5, after adding Shan, Adrian and Mike to the mix. The Melbourne pop-punk band's resume includes releasing their debut EP, Growing Pains, in 2019. Late last year, the boys also supported Western Australian band Nautical Mile on their The Only Ways Through national tour, and earlier this year, the band's hit song Into You came in at number 35 on the Faction's Hardest 100 of 2019. I caught up with Jesse over a Zoom call to find out the band's writing and recording process. What has A New Way Home been up to in isolation during the lockdown? Have you guys been working on some new projects?
In terms of what we've been doing, we haven't stopped writing. We're still writing new stuff. I mean, we've gone into the studio just to get some tracks down. But having said that, we're just still working on our new stuff. We don't really have a definitive plan we have a plan, but they have changed a little bit with this whole COVID-19 thing coming about. But now we've had to alter our plans a little bit and focus more on our new music and getting some songs down that we could eventually present to a producer. And the way I kind of look at it is, unless we got music to put out, there's no point putting too much effort to put anything out, really, unless we've got something good that we're happy with. There's bands like Drastic Park and stuff that are doing pretty well because they got their isolation music videos.
Yeah, Drastic Park's new single, Feels Like Forever, came out a couple weeks ago. You featured on that video, didn't you?
A very drunken me did. Yeah, no, that was good fun. I think, a lot of bands have pretty much just gone on hiatus at the moment because there's not really much we can do. There's no touring, there's no shows. You can't go out and do an EP launch, and unless you got music to really put out, that's worthwhile, that can sell itself without having to go out and do shows and stuff like that. I think this is a perfect opportunity to kind of just regroup, reset, and go from there, which is what we're doing at the moment.
You mentioned that A New Way Home was working on some new music and doing a bit of writing, recording. Could you take us through your writing process?
Our process is really something that we're just learning as we're going at the moment, because when this band started, we already had music in the can ready to go, which Gavin wrote a lot of that stuff along with Shan. Since we're past the last EP and we're working on new stuff, we're all kind of trying to find our way through that, which is, before the pandemic came about, I think every second Saturday we'd get together and work on some stuff, see what we could come up with in the day and find kind of our songwriting process. At the moment, it's kind of us just individually working and presenting ideas, or for example, me writing a guitar part and then sending it to Gav. He does some drums to it and then he adds some bass and then sending it over to the next person. It's kind of like that at the moment. But yeah, it's a process that we're all kind of learning because we're so new to it as a group.
Gav mentioned during a Instagram live stream that a part of his process that he puts into writing music is getting inspiration and ideas off other bands, artists, musicians, what they've written, and just tweaking it slightly or changing things to make it into new material for A New Way Home. Is that what the rest of you guys do? Like, where do you see inspiration from?
Yeah, it's more or less the same for me. For example, I'll be at work, I'll be listening to some music and then some idea will pop in my head and then I'll try and retain that before I go, when I get home, and then put that down on Logic and just go from there. But I don't have a real process. It's more just, if something comes in my head, I'll note it down straight away if I think it's cool, or even if it's not cool, because the other guys might see something in it that I don't.
They might think it's cool, yeah. Might have potential. In the studio, how do you guys put together your music? Do you all go in at one time, or do you take a couple people in at once?
When we did our last EP, so we started off with drums first. A few of us were there because I was studying production at the time, so I wanted to pick our producer's brain and see how things go. Obviously, we've got a guide track that we have pre-recorded, so we had a rough recording of each song. The drummer would get the first part down, which, is kind of your skeleton of the song. So you got your drums, then you add your next rhythm part of the song, which is your bass, and then you gradually add your basic guitar parts. Then once you got the rhythm guitar parts down, you get your leads on just to add a bit more flavor to the songs. And then you have your vocals on top of that, because then all the music is all completed and ready and set the way it should be. And then you can kind of figure out what works and what doesn't vocally. But we always track in like our parts separately. We don't do it all in one time as a group. Doing it as a group, it might feel good. It might be a bit raw, whereas doing parts individually, it's a lot more solid and a lot more easier to get the tracks down, I reckon.
Moody Music. That was Jesse Tekin from A New Way Home, taking us behind the scenes of the band's writing and recording process. The band is hoping to release new music out to fans by the end of the year and get back to touring as soon as possible. You can find out more about A New Way Home on their Facebook or Instagram page. You are listening to the Moody Music Podcast. On this episode, we have talked about Melbourne's music scene with Paula Medina, the latest music news from the month of May. We've reviewed Terra's new EP, Into Deep Blue. Clare Lynch discussed how classical and metal music are working together. And Tekin has shared how A New Way Home writes and records their music. Thank you to all my guests and listeners for hanging around. My name is Jessica Johnson, and this has been the Moody Music Podcast, Episode 1.